Hi everyone, I'm your host, Tom Spare. Welcome to Spare a Thought, the podcast where I focus on the people and organisations whose work often goes underreported or is misrepresented in the media. This is the first of 4 special episodes of the show called Going Spare in the USA. Over the next 4 episodes, I will be covering my trip, reflections and the sounds of the 4 cities I visited whilst out in the US in October and November of 2024 in the lead up to the US presidential election. I'll be reflecting on my trips to New York City, New Orleans in Louisiana, Atlanta in Georgia and Washington DC. 4 episodes, 4 cities, 1 presidential election. This is Going Spare in the USA. Prologue. Working on a Dream. The late May sun cast long shadows over Washington, D.C. It was 2022. Ahead of me stood the Washington Monument, its peak piercing the bright azure sky. Behind me came a whirring sound. I turned to see the chopping rotary blades of Marine One, the president's helicopter. The gleaming dark green helicopter formed into a silhouette as it crossed the Washington Monument before returning to the White House. Marine One made 2 more passes before setting down on the grounds of 1500 Pennsylvania Avenue. As the skies darkened, I took in the expansive World War II monument and the reflection pools bookended by the Lincoln Memorial and the Korean War Memorial. I followed a manicured trail that led me to the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. monument. Sculpted by Lei Yixin, Dr. King was carved from granite. Suited, his mighty arms folded across his chest. He clasped a wad of papers tightly in one hand. The icon of the civil rights movement towered over all who passed him. I could see details of the masonry, the veins in his hands, the smoothness of his stoic, round face. His eyes were wide, his gaze determined. Dr. King stared over the water at the Thomas Jefferson statue and memorial. The slave-owning founding father, keenly watched by the leader of America's social awakening. I was consumed by a mix of giddiness and awe. I was surrounded by people from across the United States and across the world in a place of peace and reflection. 2 young black girls asked a middle-aged Caucasian man to take a photo of them in front of Dr. King. They smiled broadly and proudly. Voices of all who passed were quiet and respectful. The park walls were etched with golden lettered quotes by Dr. King. The walls were covered in topsoil, small trees and plants. A father turned to his young son and said, "I want you to remember all these quotes here. These are the words of an important man, son. A very important man." An older white woman looked up at the statue and said aloud, "We're still working on the dream, Martin. We're still working on the dream." Her comment caught me off guard. I felt a lump in my throat. "The arc of the moral universe is long," one of the quotes read, "but it bends toward justice." Throughout its history, the US and its people have been playing a tug of war with morality and justice. Just over a year previous, a mob led by the Proud Boys, Donald Trump supporters and others, had attempted to overthrow the US government, failing to complete a hastily arranged insurrection. At the time, many believed this would be the incident that finally sunk Trump, but we all know how that ended. In 2022, I couldn't have imagined Trump's return to the White House, but 2.5 years later, I witnessed his comeback in person. This 4-part series of Spare a Thought charts the weeks leading up to Trump's triumphant return as I travelled across the United States. Part 1. Trump headlines the Garden. It's the 26th of October 2024. My first full day in the Big Apple. I had a list of places that I wanted to visit that I had not been able to see in 2022. The first being the New York Public Library. Safe to say, if I'd had more libraries like this one growing up, I would have been inspired to read way more. Built in 1895, the library has a collection of 55 million items and has a yearly budget of over $300 million. Its main branch, where I was visiting, is situated on the 5th Avenue between the 5th District and Koreatown. The library is ornately designed with grand frescoes, chandeliers, columns and arches with a heavy influence from the Romano-Greek world. It was a tourist trap with people taking photos and videos of the ceilings and designs. Simultaneously, students and locals were scattered across wooden desks, reading, researching and writing. After confidently walking in completely the wrong direction afterwards, I hopped into a taxi and was dropped off at my next bucket list destination, Carnegie Hall. Famed around the world for hosting classical and popular music, Carnegie Hall was opened in 1891, named after industrialist Andrew Carnegie, and occupies most of the east side of 7th Avenue. I was part of several tour groups being shown around the building. I got chatting to a Canadian guy who had lost his phone at the airport. He was finding the whole experience liberating. I would have been devastated and lost without mine. We got a behind-the-scenes look at the hall. The guide explained the unique design of the hall as we sat on burgundy balcony seats, looking down at the huge stage where crew members were shifting and testing sound equipment. After a brief wander through Central Park, I headed to Argosy Bookstore. Stepping into this multi-story institution felt like a journey back in time. Its 6 floors crammed with the quiet magic of rare and vintage books. I asked to see the politics section. I was accompanied by a member of staff via a 1920s lift. Here I found a treasure trove of books, journals, autobiographies, biographies and histories of US and world politics. It was a political geek's dream. There was an entire section dedicated to the presidents of the United States. My first full day in New York culminated that evening with an unforgettable night on Broadway. I was there to see a fresh and inventive take on Romeo and Juliet. Director Sam Gold had transformed the classic tragedy into a Gen Z update set on a circular stage with the audience in the round. From the playful entrance of the cast, skateboarding and dancing to pulsing music, to the electric pairing of Rachel Ziegler and Kit Connor, this production felt completely of its moment. The gender non-conforming players, clever stagecraft and Jack Antonoff's music added a deliciously queer energy, making the 426-year-old story feel alive and relevant for our time. As the final scene unfolded, the crowd erupted in a wave of clapping and cheering for the Romeo and Juliet of this moment. The quiet magic of Broadway faded with the night, and by the morning of October the 27th, I was back amidst the relentless pulse of the city. Leaving my hotel, I joined the endless stream of people pounding the streets of Midtown Manhattan. My ears were filled with the soundtracks of New York, the cacophonous symphony of raging car horns and wailing sirens. Forget Sinatra. This was the real music of the Big Apple. Running a little behind schedule, I wasn't taking in the sights and scenes around me. Instead, I was laser focused on getting to the Museum of Metropolitan Art, the Met. It was closing at 5 p.m. and I wanted to give myself a solid few hours to take in its unrivaled collection. This was my last day in New York before flying out to New Orleans. I wanted to make the most of the time left. In my haste, I paid little attention to the street sellers trying to flog their wares, nor did I register the many red baseball caps bobbing about in the crowds. Ahead, I could see a static image of a figure on a digital screen, but it was too far away to make out the details. When I reached the crossroads near Penn Station, I found a swell of people around me. There was a long queue stretching around the block. My gaze fell to a street seller with a stall draped in a red and blue banner. Dazed by the gathering crowd, I looked up to focus on the arena across the street. It was Madison Square Garden, and the figure on the screen was Donald J. Trump. The static image depicted Trump wearing a white open-collared shirt and a dark suit, paired with a red Make America Great Again, MAGA, cap. He pointed towards the mid-distance. Above him were 5 stars, and beside him the text, "Dream big again." I had, by accident, arrived at a Trump rally. I drew out my phone to capture the novel scene playing out in front of me. Trump supporters snaked around the block, excitedly waiting in line to get a glimpse of their candidate. A 2-man band played what sounded like Civil War-era marching music. The block surrounding Madison Square Garden was, for that day at least, hallowed turf for the masses of MAGA supporters. I heard a handful of people behind me muttering in disdain. However, the largest group, larger than the Trump supporters, the skeptics or the detractors, were a silent majority, those who did not fall neatly into the red corner or the blue. Everyday New Yorkers who just wanted to get on with their lives. As a non-American, it was easy to find myself caught up in the circus. But this is a city of survivors, folks who have witnessed plenty of bitter winters and unbearable summers, people who have seen their city torn apart by violence, crippled by economic downturns, and still reeling from the long shadow of COVID. People who have seen media moguls, billionaires and politicians come and go. Even still, Trump's rally seemed tenacious to me. In such a close race, I wondered why the 45th President of the United States was in New York of all places. Surely his time was better spent campaigning in the swing states, like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and South Carolina, states where he was neck and neck with his Democratic opponent, Kamala Harris. I stood by the crossroads staring up at that digital screen. The presentation of Trump felt like a mix between a Broadway musical and a wrestling match. Trump was going to entertain his followers, roll out his greatest hits. There's nothing comparable in the UK or Europe to a US presidential election, but playing Madison Square Garden was like Nigel Farage holding a campaign rally in London's O2 Arena. Trump had made entertainment out of everything in his life. His TV personality, his gaudy golf club resorts, his name slapped on so many big buildings around America. And he'd made a sport out of offending people, being outrageous, pushing the envelope. His third run had been the most colourful and controversial yet. He'd had a slew of criminal convictions and cases stacked up against him. He'd survived 2 assassination attempts. The polls were tied, and the media, old and new, was awash with anger, fake news and hysteria. There was so much noise. The messages about the impact of Trump 2.0 were being lost. The economic cost, the damage to America's standing in the world, the safety of Gaza and Palestine, the future of Ukraine were all on the line. And then a thought crystallized in my mind. If Trump's team were happy to indulge this side quest of addressing Madison Square Garden, they must have suspected their victory was either already tied up or close at hand. This was not a repeat of his 2016 presidential win. It would be something far more seismic. He was going to win the popular vote, the Electoral College, and probably the Congress too. Part of me wanted to join the queue to watch the show, to see Trump speak. I even pondered whether I should buy a MAGA cap. Perhaps I wanted to own a piece of history. Perhaps I wanted to be part of history. At the same time, I knew that the rally was not meant for me. If I joined the queue and got to the entrance, would security question why I had a British passport? Would I be forcefully ejected from the scene? Was it dangerous being there? After all, I wasn't a Republican or a Democrat. I didn't have citizenship or voting rights in the US. I was an observer, a tourist, an anxious 30-something-year-old man. So I came to my senses, I turned away from Madison Square Garden, and I headed north towards the Met, leaving the Trump fantasy behind. You've been listening to Going Spare in the USA, Part 1, Trump Headlines the Garden. In the next episode, in Part 2, I'll be exploring the wonderful world of New Orleans. I'm Tom Spare. I wrote, edited and produced this episode, additional editing by Emily Merry. The music is by Wondershare, Filmora. This has been a Be The Change Media Network production. Thanks for listening.